What if a place everyone remembers never existed? In the summer of 1987, a carnival rolled into the small town of Clearwater, Ohio. Bright lights, strange faces, and rides that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But when it left after 3 nights, 5 teenagers vanished forever. To this day, the carnival isn't listed in any records. That question has haunted the small town of Clearwater, Ohio, for nearly 4 decades. Ask anyone old enough to remember the summer of 1987, and they'll tell you about the carnival that rolled into town like a fever dream. 3 nights of lights, music, and laughter that ended in tragedy. Because when the rides vanished as quickly as they appeared, so did 5 local teenagers. And to this day, there are no records of that carnival. Not a permit, not a receipt, not even a name. Only stories, and the hollow ache of families who never got their children back. It began on a Thursday evening in July. Clearwater wasn't the sort of place where surprises happened. It was a mill town, quiet, predictable, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But that night, something strange appeared in the empty lot just off Highway 6, a carnival. No one had seen trucks pull in, or workers set up. By the time people noticed, the Ferris wheel was already spinning, glowing against the twilight like a giant, rotating lantern. Rides creaked, booths rang with bells, and the smell of buttered popcorn drifted on the warm air. Teenagers were the first to rush there. Linda Hayes, 17, had her camera strung around her neck. She was always snapping pictures. People, buildings, little slices of life that others overlooked. Her best friend, Jenny Marsh, trailed beside her, clutching a soda bottle, nervous but excited. Behind them, Linda's boyfriend Mark Ellison strolled with casual confidence, cigarette tucked behind his ear. 2 more friends joined them, Kevin Doyle, the joker of the group, and Paul Rivers, the star athlete. Together, the 5 of them were inseparable that summer. Where did this even come from? Jenny whispered as they walked past the ticket booth, its striped awning fluttering in the breeze. Mark smirked. Who cares? Free fun in this dump of a town? I'm not asking questions. Linda lifted her camera and clicked the shutter. The lights blurred into streaks of red and gold. It's beautiful, she murmured, but not everyone felt that way. Adults in Clearwater stood at the edge of the lot, frowning, exchanging uneasy looks. Sheriff Hank Wallace pulled up in his cruiser, stepping out with a skeptical squint. He asked the ticket seller, a man with waxy skin and eyes too pale to be real, for permits. The man simply smiled and gestured toward the midway, where the music swelled louder. Sheriff Wallace muttered under his breath and drove off. Among the curious onlookers that night was Detective Raymond Cole. At 42, he had lived in Clearwater long enough to know that nothing ever happened here without word, spreading weeks in advance. Yet, here was a full carnival, sprung from nowhere. Something about the place unsettled him. The rides looked dated, like relics from another era. The carousel horses had cracked paint. The Ferris wheel groaned as it turned, and the barkers shouted in old-time slang that didn't sound modern at all. Cole lit a cigarette and studied the crowd, filing the oddness away in the back of his mind. He didn't know yet that this carnival would become the darkest case of his career. 5 teenagers spent hours wandering the midway. Kevin tried every game, laughing even when he lost. Paul tested his strength at the highest striker and won a cheap stuffed bear. Jenny clung to Linda's arm inside the haunted house, squealing at every jump scare. Mark disappeared for a while to smoke near the bumper cars, only to reappear with a smirk. And always, Linda photographed everything. The glowing bulbs, the painted faces, the eerie clowns juggling in silence. Her camera clicked over and over, capturing moments no one would ever see again. Past, the night deepened. The air grew colder, though no one seemed to notice except Linda. She pulled her jacket tighter, staring at the shadows between the tents. For a moment, She swore she saw someone watching them, a tall man in a dark coat and top hat, his face pale under the striped lights. When she blinked, he was gone. "Linda, come on," Mark called, waving from the entrance to the funhouse. Kevin and Paul were already inside, their laughter echoing. Jenny hesitated, but Linda tugged her along. The mirrors inside distorted their reflections, stretching them into grotesque versions of themselves. Jenny laughed nervously, though her eyes darted around. "Somewhere in the maze," Kevin shouted. "Race you to the exit!" His voice bounced strangely, as if the mirrors swallowed sound. Linda snapped another photo, her flash lighting up a dozen warped versions of herself. When they finally spilled out onto the grass, they were breathless and grinning. None of them noticed the tall man standing in the distance, watching silently from behind the carousel. Back in town, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes sat on her porch with a glass of iced tea, waiting for her daughter. She trusted Linda, but something about that carnival gnawed at her. She remembered carnivals from her own childhood, but never one that came without notice. Hours passed. Midnight approached. Dorothy rose to fetch her daughter, but just as she stepped down the porch stairs, she froze. Across the street, under the dim glow of the street lamp, stood the man in the top hat. He was tall, with a sharp profile and a smile that didn't belong. And he wasn't looking at Dorothy. He was looking at Linda, miles away, as if he could see her through the night. Dorothy dropped her glass, shattering it on the porch. But when she looked again, the man was gone. Tartar Carnival pulsed with light and sound, kids laughing, rides spinning. But somewhere among the shadows, the ringmaster, Edward Finch, had already chosen his next act, and his eyes were fixed on Linda Hayes. Clearwater, Ohio, July 17th, 1987. E.T. Carnival was alive well past midnight. The Ferris wheel spun lazily, its lights flickering like dying stars against the black sky. Music carried across the field, bright and cheerful, yet somehow hollow, as though the calliope was playing through water. Linda Hayes leaned against a railing, her camera strap looped tightly around her wrists. She'd taken almost an entire roll of film that night. Her friends laughed nearby, their voices competing with the barkers shouting from the game booths. "Mon, Linda," Mark Ellison called, slinging an arm around her shoulder. He reeked faintly of cigarettes, his grin wide. "One more ride before we head home. You pick." Linda hesitated. Her mother would be furious if she stayed out much later, but the glow of the carnival tugged at her, urging her to linger. She glanced at Jenny, who nodded timidly, and at Paul and Kevin, who were already daring each other to ride the spinning tilt-a-whirl. "The fun house again," Linda finally said. "Just one more time." They cheered, stumbling toward the striped entrance. The man at the door, tall, skeletal, his bow tie crooked, tipped his hat without speaking. His eyes, Linda noticed, were a milky gray, as if blind. Inside the funhouse was darker than before. The mirrors reflected distorted versions of their faces, stretched jaws, melting eyes, bodies too long to be human. Kevin laughed, banging on the glass. Jenny clutched Linda's arm, whispering that she wanted to leave. "Relax," Mark said, swaggering down the narrow hall. "It's just mirrors." But Linda wasn't so sure. The reflections didn't always move when they did. Sometimes in the warped glass, she swore she saw a figure standing behind them, tall, with a top hat. "Guys," Paul muttered, his voice lower now. "Did you hear that?" A faint laugh echoed through the maze, too soft to belong to any of them. Jenny's grip tightened. "Let's go," Linda whispered. She pulled Jenny forward, leading the group toward what she thought was the exit. But the corridors twisted back on themselves. Every corner led to another hall of mirrors. Their reflections multiplied, hundreds of versions of themselves staring back. "Linda," Jenny said suddenly, pointing. "Look." In the mirror ahead, their reflections were missing. Only an empty corridor stared back. till lights above flickered, then buzzed out entirely. Kevin cracked a joke, something about horror movies, but his laugh broke into silence. When the lights came back on, he was gone. "Kevin!" Paul shouted, spinning around. His voice ricocheted off the glass. "No answer," Jenny screamed. She swore she saw him in the mirror, pressed against the glass, pounding with his fists. But when Paul slammed into it, the mirror only rattled in its frame. "Enough!" Mark snapped, trying to sound braver than he felt. This is some stupid trick, but Linda knew it wasn't. She grabbed Jenny's hand and bolted. The group scattered, their shouts overlapping as they ran through the maze. Linda caught fleeting glimpses in the mirrors. Kevin's terrified face, Paul being pulled backward by unseen hands, Jenny crying. Somewhere deeper inside, carnival music played faintly, as though the funhouse itself had a heartbeat. Silence. Be morning? Clearwater awoke to a strange stillness. "Mrs. Dorothy Hayes checked her daughter's bed and found it empty, covers neatly folded, as if Linda had never come home. Panic gripped her chest. She called the Ellisons, then the Marshes, the Doyles, and the Rivers. All reported the same. Their children had not returned. Phones rang across town. Parents rushed to the field. By sunrise, dozens of cars lined the gravel road, headlights cutting through the mist. Mothers and fathers shouted their children's names, scouring the midway. But the carnival was gone. The Ferris wheel, the booths, the tents, every trace of it had vanished. Only trampled grass remained, as if nothing had ever been there. The smell of popcorn and sugar lingered faintly in the damp morning air. Sheriff Hank Wallace arrived first, followed by Detective Raymond Cole. Wallace cursed under his breath, surveying the empty lot. "This is insane. A whole carnival doesn't just vanish." Cole crouched, running a hand over the flattened grass. The earth was warm, as though something massive had recently stood there. He lit a cigarette, his hands trembling just slightly. Dorothy Hayes stormed toward him, tears streaming down her face. "Where's my daughter, Detective?" She was here. They all were. Cole wanted to give her an answer. But what could he say? He had seen the carnival too. He had heard its music, smelled its food. Yet now, in daylight, it was nothing more than a rumor. Behind him, parents shouted at the sheriff, demanding action. Wallace barked back that the kids must have run off together, maybe hitchhiked out of town. "No," Dorothy hissed, shaking her head. "Linda wouldn't leave me. She wouldn't just disappear." Her words echoed in Cole's mind. He remembered the strange way the rides looked old, the way the workers never spoke, the way the ringmaster had watched the children with quiet hunger. Something was wrong here. Terribly wrong. That afternoon, Cole drove to the only gas station on Highway 6, hoping the cameras had picked up something. The clerk grumbled but rolled the tape anyway. Cole leaned close, eyes narrowing. There they were. Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, Paul, walking together along the roadside just before midnight. They laughed, pushing each other playfully. Behind them, in the distance, lights flickered faintly in the dark. All lights. But here was the impossible part. When the camera panned slightly to the right, the field was empty. The teens were walking toward nothing. Cole rewound, played it again. Same result. They vanished into an open field, chasing lights no one else could see. He sat back in his chair, cigarette forgotten between his fingers. His pulse quickened. Something about this carnival. It wasn't real, or at least not part of the world he understood. That night, as Dorothy Hayes wept on her porch, she swore she heard faint music drifting on the wind. Calliope notes, playful and haunting, carrying from the empty field. On somewhere in the shadows of Clearwater, Edward Finch, the ringmaster, smiled. Clearwater had never known chaos like this. The disappearance of 5 teenagers sent ripples of fear through the quiet town. And by the next morning, the Hayes home was crowded with relatives, neighbors, and police. Mothers clutched each other on front lawns. Fathers muttered angrily about runaways, and teenagers whispered about the carnival, their voices trembling. Detective Raymond Cole sat at the kitchen table of Dorothy Hayes, notebook open, cigarette smoldering between his fingers. Dorothy sat across from him, her eyes bloodshot, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. She wouldn't run away. Dorothy said for the 5th time, "Linda's all I have. She wouldn't leave me like that." Cole nodded, jotting the words down. He had known Dorothy for years. She wasn't a hysterical mother. She was level-headed, strong. Her conviction gnawed at him. "Did she say anything strange before she left?" Cole asked gently. Dorothy hesitated. She said the carnival felt different, like it didn't belong. She took her camera with her. Said she wanted to capture it before it disappeared. I thought she meant the night ending. Cole tapped his pen. "And when you saw the man in the top hat?" Dorothy shuddered. "He was looking right at her, detective. I swear it. Not at me. At Linda. Like he already knew she was his." Cole closed his notebook. That detail wasn't going in the official report. Not yet. Sheriff Wallace would laugh him out of the station. Be noon. The sheriff called a town meeting at the community center. Parents crowded the folding chairs, voices sharp with fear and anger. Sheriff Wallace, broad-shouldered and red-faced, stood at the front. "These kids," he began, his tone gruff, "likely took off on their own. Teenagers do this. They get restless, they run. Doesn't mean there's foul play." A murmur of outrage swept through the room. Paul Rivers' father shot to his feet. "You think 5 kids just vanished together?" "In the middle of the night, maybe they hitched a ride out of town," Wallace said flatly. "We're putting out calls to nearby counties. But I want to talk about ghost carnivals or kidnappers stirring up panic." All eyes turned to Cole. He'd been silent, leaning against the back wall. Finally, he spoke. "It was there," he said. "I saw the carnival. So did many of you. It wasn't a rumor. It was real." "Then where is it?" Wallace barked, his face reddening. "Where's your proof? Because my men went out there this morning. And guess what they found? An empty field. No tire tracks, no trash, no permits. Nothing. You want to chase fairy tales? Cole, go ahead. But I'll stick to facts." "Data rooms split," half the townsfolk muttered agreement with the sheriff. The other half stared at Cole with desperate eyes. Dorothy Hayes was among them. "Please," she whispered. "You have to keep looking." Cole gave a small nod. "I will." That afternoon, he began knocking on doors. Witnesses gave conflicting stories. Mrs. Hanley, who lived near the highway, swore she heard carnival music drifting through her open window that night. "It was loud," she said, clutching her rosary. "My husband told me I was dreaming, but I know what I heard." But old Mr. Carr, who lived 2 houses down, shook his head when Cole asked, "Carnival?" "Son, there was no carnival. I've been here 60 years, and I'd know if a circus came to town." Cole frowned. "You didn't hear music?" "Nope, just the crickets." Similar contradictions followed. Some swore they saw rides spinning, lights blazing. Others claimed the field had been empty. The deeper Cole dug, the more slippery the truth became, as though the carnival itself had left holes in people's memories. By evening, Cole's frustration boiled over. He returned to the station, replaying the gas station tape once more. There were the kids, clear as day, walking toward the field, laughter frozen in grainy black and white. And behind them, those faint carnival lights flickering. But every time he tried to focus, the lights seemed wrong, out of sync with the rest of the footage. Sometimes they didn't move at all. Sometimes they blinked out. Sheriff Wallace walked past, glancing over his shoulder. Still wasting your time? Cole ignored him. He rewound the tape, squinting at the shadows. His pulse quickened. 1 point. Just for a split second, the camera caught something else, a tall figure in a top hat, standing at the very edge of the field. Cole froze to the frame. The image was blurry, but unmistakable. A pale face, a dark coat, a smile. Deadward Finch. Hot night. Cole sat alone in his car outside Dorothy Hayes' house. He told himself he was there to keep an eye on her, but the truth was simpler. He was afraid to go home. Afraid that if he closed his eyes, he'd hear that music, see those lights in his own backyard. Dorothy stepped onto the porch, clutching a cigarette. She saw him and walked over, her face drawn. You saw something, didn't you? Cole hesitated. Maybe. On the tape. A man? Her hand shook as she lit the cigarette. The man in the hat. Cole didn't answer, but he didn't need to. From somewhere in the distance, faint and haunting, came the sound of a calliope. The next morning, the town of Clearwater woke to the heavy silence of dread. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was suspicion. The faces of missing teenagers stared back from hastily printed flyers taped to lampposts and storefronts. Parents clutched photos as though the sheer act of holding them would bring their children back. Sheriff Hank Wallace had barely slept. He sat at his desk, his coffee untouched, staring at a map of the town with 5 red pins stuck in the carnival grounds. Each pin marked the last confirmed sighting of the missing kids. On the surface, the evidence made no sense. But Hank had learned long ago that evil rarely followed reason. Sheriff? A deputy interrupted, peeking into the office. Mrs. Marsh is here. She looks shaken. Eleanor Marsh stepped inside, her eyes wide with exhaustion. She clutched a folded flyer of her daughter, Jenny, her knuckles pale. Sheriff, she said, her voice trembling. You need to hear this. It's about the carnival. Hank gestured for her to sit. Go on. Eleanor glanced nervously around the room, as if afraid someone or something might be listening. Jenny told me something, the night before she went missing. She said she and the others were planning to sneak back to the carnival after hours. They wanted to explore the tents, maybe go behind the rides. She said there was a man there who promised them a secret. Hank frowned. A man? Did she describe him? She called him the ringmaster. Said he had a tall black hat and a voice that gave her chills. She laughed when she told me, said it was probably just an act. But now, Eleanor's voice cracked. Now I think it wasn't. Hank leaned back, his jaw tightening. The ringmaster's lead figure had been hard to pin down. No name, no clear face, just a looming figure in photographs and eyewitness accounts. Mrs. Marsh, did Jenny say what kind of secret he promised? Eleanor nodded faintly. She said he told them he could show them a place outside of time. Hank felt a chill crawl up his spine. Before he could respond, the deputy rushed back in. Sheriff, you'd better come see this. The town square was already crowded by the time Hank arrived. People murmured anxiously, pointing at the library's bulletin board. Someone had posted a photograph, one that shouldn't exist. It was an old, faded image, black and white, depicting the exact same carnival grounds. The Ferris wheel, the striped tents, even the ornate archway at the entrance. But this picture wasn't from last week. Judging by the clothes of the people in the shot, it had to be from decades ago, at least the 1920s. Hank tore the photograph down and studied it. His stomach tightened. Standing in the center of the carnival, looking directly at the camera, was the ringmaster. His top hat was tilted forward, his face half shadowed, but his grin was unmistakable. Where the hell did this come from? Hank demanded. An elderly man stepped forward from the crowd. It was Henry Whitlock, the town's unofficial historian. "That was in our archives," he said, his voice grave. "I found it years ago but didn't think much of it then. Sheriff, this carnival. It's been here before." The murmurs grew louder. Some swore under their breath. Others clutched crosses or whispered prayers. Hank scanned the photo again, noting the detail. The rides, the people smiling, and yet in the background, faint but visible, were blurred shapes, figures that didn't look quite human. He tucked the photo into his jacket and turned back to Henry. "What else do you know?" Henry hesitated. "Rumors, too. Old stories. Folks used to say the carnival would show up every few decades. Always unannounced. Always gone in the dead of night. And every time people would vanish. Not many, but enough." Hank stared at him. "And no one thought to mention this sooner." Henry's face tightened with guilt. "People stopped talking about it, pretended it wasn't real. But Sheriff, I think it's happening again." That night, Detective Raymond Cole drove to the empty carnival grounds. The vast field was stripped bare. No tents, no rides, no sign it had ever been there. Only muddy tire tracks remained, carving into the earth. He stepped out, flashlight in hand, and scanned the field. At first, there was nothing, but then he noticed it. Faint impressions in the dirt, shoe prints, multiple pairs, small ones. He crouched down, his beam catching the faint outline of a girl's sneaker print. His heart sank. Prints led toward the far end of the field, into the tree line. Cole followed, his breath quickening. The deeper he went, the more he felt the woods pressing in around him, dark and suffocating. And then he saw it. A scrap of fabric, snagged on a branch. Red and white striped, like the material from a carnival tent. Cole reached for it, but the sound of laughter froze him in place. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. Children's laughter. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing through the trees. Till laughter stopped. Slowly, music began to play. A faint, eerie melody carried on the night air, the unmistakable sound of a carnival calliope. Cole's flashlight flickered. Out in the distance, through the trees, he swore he saw the faint glow of carnival lights. Back in town, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes sat alone in her living room, Linda's photo clutched against her chest. The house was too quiet, suffocating in its emptiness. She thought about the last thing her daughter had said before leaving that night. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just a carnival. What's the worst that could happen?" A knock on the door broke her thoughts. She hurried to answer, half hoping, half dreading. But when she opened it, no one was there. Instead, sitting neatly on the porch step, was a single carnival ticket, bright red, untouched by dirt or rain. Dorothy's breath caught as she bent down, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. On the back, written in looping black ink, were the words, "Your daughter is waiting." Cole returned from the woods an hour later, pale and shaken. He burst into the station, clutching the striped fabric scrap. "Deputy, get Dorothy Hayes, now." But before he could say more, he noticed something on his desk. It was another photograph, fresh, glossy, as if it had been developed that day. His blood ran cold. It was a picture of him, standing in the woods, flashlight in hand. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows, was the figure of the ringmaster. The morning after the sleepless night, Detective Raymond Cole sat hunched over his desk in the temporary command post set up inside the town library. Files, photographs, and maps were scattered across the table like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't fit together. He rubbed his temples, staring at the 5 missing persons' photographs: Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, and Paul. Their faces, frozen in youth and hope, gnawed at him. Zara Mitchell sat quietly in the corner of the room. She had been helping to collect statements from townsfolk, jotting down what they remembered about the carnival. At just 19, Sarah was young, but her determination impressed even Cole. She still carried the guilt of being there that night and leaving early, haunted by what-ifs. "You keep staring at those photos like they'll answer back," Sarah said softly. Cole glanced at her, his tired eyes narrowing. "Sometimes, Sarah, faces hold truths people won't say out loud." Sarah hesitated, then reached into her bag and slid out a small notebook. "I was thinking about something. My mom used to keep these old town flyers in a box. Last night, I found one from 1987, advertising the carnival." Cole sat up straight. "You're sure?" She nodded. "It says Gallagher and Sons Traveling Carnival, 1 night only." "But the carnival stayed for 3 nights, didn't it?" Cole frowned. The discrepancy was glaring. Why would the flyer advertise only 1 night if the carnival actually lingered longer? Before they could discuss it further, Officer Perez hurried into the library. She was carrying a manila envelope, her face tense. "Detective, you need to see this." She laid the envelope on the desk and opened it. Inside were a series of photographs, grainy, black and white images recovered from the local newspaper archives. Most showed crowds at the carnival. Children with balloons, families at food stalls, the Ferris wheel silhouetted against the night sky. But one photo made Cole's blood run cold. It showed the 5 teenagers, Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, and Paul, standing together in front of the House of Mirrors. Their expressions were uneasy, almost tense. But that wasn't what disturbed Cole. Behind them, in the reflection of the mirrors, stood a tall man in a black hat and long coat. His face was obscured by shadow, and yet, in the reflection, his eyes seemed unnaturally bright. "Who the hell is that?" Sarah whispered. "No one remembers him," Perez said. "I've asked half the town. No one can identify him." Cole studied the photo again. The man's posture, his looming presence. It was almost as if he was waiting for the teenagers to turn around. "Print me a 12 copies, Cole ordered. "We need to find out who this man is." That afternoon, Cole and Sarah walked through the town, showing the photo to anyone who had attended the carnival. Most people shook their heads, insisting they didn't recognize the figure. But one old man, Mr. Harold Jennings, paused for a long time when he saw it. "You know him," Harold finally muttered. His voice was shaky, his eyes distant. "Or at least, I thought I did." Cole leaned forward. "Tell me." Harold swallowed hard. "Name was Elias Gallagher. He was the owner of that carnival. Folks said he made a deal with the devil to keep his shows running. But that can't be. Elias died in 1965. I went to his funeral." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Then who was at the carnival?" Harold shook his head, clutching his cane tightly. "That's the question you should be asking, young lady, because if Elias was really there, then none of you are safe." Back at the library, Cole spread out everything they had. Photos, flyers, witness statements. The carnival wasn't just a traveling show. It seemed like something more. Something that slid into towns, left chaos, and disappeared without a trace. Past night fell. Sarah grew restless. She stared at the photo of the teenagers in front of the House of Mirrors. Something nagged at her. "To mirrors," she whispered suddenly. "Detective, look closely." Cole leaned in. "What about them?" Sarah pointed to the reflections. "Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, and Paul. Their reflections don't match their actual poses. Look at Linda. She's got her arms crossed in the photo, but in the reflection, her hands are at her sides. And Kevin, he's looking forward, but his reflection is turned." Cole's stomach knotted. "That's impossible." Sarah's voice trembled. "What if the mirrors weren't just reflecting them? What if they were showing where they were going to be? Cole exhaled sharply. The thought was insane, and yet the unease in his gut told him not to dismiss it. "Tot evening," Sarah's mother called the library in a panic. "Sarah, it's your cousin Emma. She just found something in Grandma's attic. You need to come." Cole insisted on going with her. The two drove through the darkened streets to Emma's house, where Emma, pale and shaken, handed them an old shoebox. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings, bundled letters, and, most disturbing, a faded carnival ticket stub dated 1921. "What is this?" Sarah asked. Emma pointed to one of the clippings. It described another disappearance. 3 children from a nearby town who vanished after attending a carnival. The article mentioned the same name, Gallagher and Sons Traveling Carnival. Cole read aloud. The carnival arrived in town for 3 nights. Afterward, families reported their children missing. No records exist of the carnival's registration, and investigators could not locate Gallagher or his performers. Zara's hands trembled. "Detective, it's happened before." Cole's jaw tightened. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't just about 5 teenagers in 1987. This was bigger, much bigger, and if the carnival ever returned, it might happen again. Later that night, as Sarah tried to sleep, she thought she heard music, distant, faint, and almost dreamlike, a calliope tune drifting through the air. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and looked out her window. Chess Street was empty, but for just a moment she swore she saw flickering lights beyond the trees, like carnival lights, glowing in the dark. The police cruiser creaked as Detective Raymond Cole shifted in his seat, the weight of the long day pressing down on him. The dashboard clock blinked 12:14 a.m. It was well past midnight, yet no one in town seemed able to sleep. Lanterns still glowed faintly in windows, and the distant sound of voices carried on the cool night air. This wasn't just another case. It was already becoming something darker. Inside the small conference room of the sheriff's office, Cole and Sheriff Hank Wallace met with the parents of the missing teens. The parents looked hollow-eyed, clutching photographs of their children. Mrs. Marsh gripped the edges of her chair so tightly, her knuckles were white. "They wouldn't just run off," she whispered. "Not Jenny. She had school this morning. She was supposed to take her driving test next week. She was so excited." Cole leaned forward, speaking in his calm but firm voice. "We believe you, Mrs. Marsh. None of this makes sense. The carnival wasn't supposed to be here. There are no permits, no official records, nothing. But 5 kids are missing, and every single one of them was last seen there." A heavy silence filled the room. Sheriff Wallace finally muttered, "We'll start again at first light. Check every road, every field. We'll find something." But Cole wasn't convinced. He couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this isn't just a missing persons case. It was something stranger, something calculated. By dawn, Cole returned to the carnival grounds with a small team of officers. But what had been a sprawling fairground only hours ago was now an empty field. Grass bent and trampled, tire ruts gouging the dirt, bits of litter, popcorn boxes, a broken balloon string, an empty soda cup were the only proof that anything had been there at all. One officer muttered, "Looks like they packed up in the middle of the night." Cole crouched, running his fingers through the dirt. The ruts were deep, freshly made, and there was a faint oily sheen on the grass where generators had once stood, but there was no sign of where they went. No trucks, no trailers, just gone. And yet, something caught his eye. Small scrap of red cloth snagged on the branch of a bush at the edge of the field. He carefully pulled it free. It looked like a strip of costume fabric, the kind clowns or performers might wear. Stitched into the hem, in faded thread, were the letters. "CCH, what do you think?" Wallace asked, peering over his shoulder. Cole turned the fabric in his hand. "It's not much, but it's something." Later that afternoon, Cole spoke with locals who had visited the carnival. Their testimonies only deepened the mystery. Mrs. Greenwood, a school librarian, said, "It was the strangest carnival I've ever seen. They didn't take money, just tickets, but no one saw where the tickets came from. They had these odd performers. A tall man with a painted face who never blinked. A woman in a feathered mask who just stood by the entrance, staring at people. It didn't feel right. I swear, when I drove past the field yesterday morning, there was nothing there. Empty. And then by noon, the whole carnival was up and running. I don't know how they did it." Cole jotted notes, each word leaving a heavier weight on his mind. A carnival that appeared overnight and vanished just as quickly. Performers who didn't act like performers. Missing kids. And no paper trail. It was as if the carnival itself was a ghost. That evening, Cole drove out to visit one of the teens' homes. He pulled up at the Doyle's small house on Maple Street. Kevin's younger brother, Eli, only 9 years old, sat on the porch steps hugging his knees. When Cole stepped up, Eli looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you going to find him?" he asked softly. Cole crouched down. "I promise I'll do everything I can." Eli hesitated, then whispered, "I saw him last night. Kevin, in my dream." Cole gave him a patient smile. "Dreams can feel real sometimes. It's just your mind trying to make sense of things." But Eli shook his head, gripping Cole's sleeve with surprising strength. "No, it wasn't just a dream. He was in a tent, with mirrors everywhere. He was calling for me, but there was someone else too. A man with a painted face. He told me to stay out." Cole felt a chill crawl up his spine. He remembered Mrs. Greenwood's description of the tall man with the painted face. "Ailey?" he asked carefully. "Did Kevin ever tell you he was going to the mirror tent?" Ailey nodded. "He said he was going to go in there with his friends. But he didn't come back." Cole left the Doyle's house with a knot in his stomach. He tried to dismiss Eli's dream as a child's imagination, but something about it gnawed at him. Back at his motel room, Cole spread out his notes. Witnesses, carnival descriptions, the scrap of red fabric with CH. He drew a circle around the initials. Who? Or what? Was CH? He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of old case files. For years, he had studied strange disappearances, fringe cases that never made sense, traveling fairs. He remembered one in particular from a 1956 report in Oklahoma. 3 children vanished after visiting a carnival that had no permits on record. On there, scribbled in the margins of the old file, was a note. "Look for initials." CH. Cole's pulse quickened. The pattern stretched back decades. This wasn't the first time, and maybe not the last. The next morning, he drove to the county records office. He scoured through permits, travel logs, anything that might hint at a carnival visiting. Nothing. It was as though it had never existed. But, just as he was about to leave, a clerk approached him quietly. She was an older woman with sharp eyes. "You're asking about the carnival?" she whispered. Cole nodded. The woman glanced around nervously, then slid a folded piece of paper into his hand. "I don't talk about it much, but I saw them once. Back in '62. Same thing. They came, they left, and kids went missing. My cousin never came home." Cole unfolded the paper. It was an old newspaper clipping. A grainy black and white photo of a carnival tent with the headline, "The Carnival of Holloway Strikes Again?" And scrawled in pen beneath it were the words, "Beware the ringmaster." He never blinked. Cole felt his mouth go dry. The same man. The same carnival. Decades apart. And now, 5 more kids were gone. As Cole drove back into town, clutching the clipping, his phone rang. Sheriff Wallace's voice crackled through the line, tense and urgent. "You need to get out here, Cole. Now. We found something." The line went dead. Cole tightened his grip on the wheel, dread rising in his chest. What could they have found? Basement of Mrs. Harper's farmhouse smelled of damp wood and mildew. Dust floated in the single beam of light from the flickering bulb overhead. Detective Raymond Cole guided Sarah, Mark, and Paul down the creaking steps, his revolver drawn. At first glance, it was an ordinary cellar, old jars of preserves stacked on wooden shelves, rusted farm tools, leaning against the wall, a washing basin collecting drops from a leaky pipe. But there was something about the silence, the oppressive air, that made Sarah's stomach churn. "Stay behind me," Cole whispered, scanning the shadows. Mark clutched a flashlight tightly, its beam quivering as he moved it across the room. That's when Paul gasped. On the far wall, beneath a tarp mottled with dust, something large jutted out. Mark yanked the tarp aside and froze. It was a mirror. Not just any mirror, but an enormous one, almost as tall as the wall itself. The frame was carved with strange patterns, shapes that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd seen this before. "To Carnival," she whispered. There was a mirror maze, one that felt wrong. Paul's voice cracked. "You mean this came from the carnival?" Cole ran his hand over the frame. "It shouldn't even be here." His eyes narrowed at Mrs. Harper's mention upstairs. "She brought me something from the carnival. Something I could never get rid of." Mark slowly stepped closer. His reflection shimmered strangely, delayed, like the mirror wasn't mimicking his movements in real time. And then his reflection smiled. But Mark hadn't. Stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Did you see that?" Sarah grabbed his arm, her pulse racing. "Don't look at it too long." The air in the basement seemed to thicken. A low hum filled the room, almost like distant carnival music carried on the wind. Cole clenched his jaw and pulled the group toward the stairs. "We're not staying here. This is evidence." But before he could finish, the mirror shifted. Not physically, but the reflection inside it changed. Instead of the basement, it showed the carnival midway, glowing with sickly neon light. A Ferris wheel turned slowly in the background, but the cars were empty. And in the reflection, 5 figures stood in the distance. 2 missing teens. Paul's knees nearly gave out. "It's them," he whispered. "Oh my God, it's really them." Sarah's heart pounded. The teens weren't just standing, they were waving. Their mouths moved, silently begging for help. But there was something wrong with their eyes. Too wide, too dark, as if shadows lived inside them. Suddenly, the basement bulb burst overhead, plunging them into near darkness. Mark's flashlight flickered wildly. For a split second, it illuminated Mrs. Harper, standing at the top of the stairs, her face pale and tight. "You shouldn't have gone down there," she croaked. Cole raised his gun. "What the hell do you know about this?" Harper's hands shook violently. He told me it would come back if I ever spoke of it." "Who?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. But before Mrs. Harper could answer, the mirror shuddered. A crack split across its surface, not like breaking glass, but like something inside was trying to claw its way out. Tone grew louder, transforming into faint calliope music, the sound of carousel horses creaking. Laughter that wasn't human. Sarah screamed, "We have to go!" They bolted up the stairs, Cole pulling Mrs. Harper along despite her protests. As they spilled into the farmhouse kitchen, the ground beneath them rattled. Plates clattered in the cupboards, and the lights overhead swung violently. Mark slammed the basement door shut. For a moment, silence returned, except for Mrs. Harper's frantic sobbing. "They'll take you too," she muttered, rocking on her heels. "That mirror doesn't just show things, it pulls them in." Sarah crouched in front of her. "You knew, didn't you? All these years, you knew what happened to the carnival, Mrs. Harper's eyes glistened with tears. I was just a girl when I came through. My brother. He vanished the same night as those kids. My parents never believed me, but I saw him walk straight into one of those mirrors. Her lips trembled, and I never saw him again. Paul's voice cracked with panic. So that's it? They're trapped? Forever? Mrs. Harper shook her head violently. No. The carnival comes back. It always comes back. But only for those who are already marked. Marked? Cole pressed. She looked at Sarah, her eyes hollow. You went there, didn't you? You stepped inside that carnival. That means it's already chosen you. The room froze. Sarah's breath caught in her chest. She had walked those neon-lit paths, stood beneath the Ferris wheel, heard the laughter that didn't sound human. No, it was after her. The next morning, the farmhouse stood eerily quiet. Cole had insisted they stay the night, rotating shifts, keeping watch. But even as dawn crept through the curtains, Sarah couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. When she finally stepped outside, the cornfield stretched endlessly, the air sharp with dew. She thought the night's horrors were behind them, until she saw it. A trail of footprints. Small, childlike prints, pressed deep into the mud, leading from the back porch toward the horizon. Zara's heart stuttered. She followed them a few steps, Mark and Paul hurrying to catch up. The prints didn't fade. They kept going, through the corn, toward the tree line. Aunt. Then she saw it. At the edge of the field, half hidden in the mist, stood a wooden carnival sign. The paint was faded, but the words were unmistakable. Welcome to the Grand Eclipse Carnival. One night only. Zara's mouth went dry. She turned back toward Cole, who had just stepped outside. Cole? It's here, she whispered. The detective's face hardened as his eyes locked on the sign. Then tonight, we end this. But in the distance, faint and almost mocking, came the sound of a calliope, a tune no one could ever forget. Tea house, where Sarah had found the faded newspaper clipping, grew colder the longer they stayed inside, though the summer night air outside was sticky and warm. Detective Raymond Cole kept glancing at his watch, his nerves betraying him. He had been in many crime scenes, but this felt different. It was as though the walls themselves were watching them. Zara held the clipping against the dim light of her lantern. The headline read, Carnival Vanishes Without a Trace. June 12, 1953. Beneath it was a photo of smiling townsfolk, pointing at the empty fairgrounds. Where bright tents and rides should have been, the photo showed only barren earth and trampled grass. What if it's not just a coincidence? Sarah whispered. What if the carnival comes and goes on some kind of cycle? Detective Cole frowned. You're saying this thing has happened before? Sarah nodded. Every few decades, people vanish, and the carnival disappears like smoke. Before Cole could reply, the lantern flickered. The faint sound of music drifted through the broken window, an old calliope tune, slightly off-key. They froze. The carnival music was back. Sarah gripped Cole's arm. It's too early. It shouldn't return for another night. The sound swelled, creeping into the room, vibrating in their bones. Cole pulled out his gun instinctively, though deep down he knew it was useless against whatever this was. He motioned for Sarah to stay behind him as they crept back outside. The carnival lights had returned on the horizon, brighter than before. The Ferris wheel spun slowly, its lights blinking red and green, though no one was on it. The carousel horses bobbed in a slow, eerie rhythm. The whole fairground glowed, impossibly vivid, as though time itself had been rewound. Sarah's breath caught. It's pulling us in. They weren't walking, yet their bodies moved forward, their feet shuffling across the dirt. Cole dug his heels into the ground, trying to resist. Fight it, he barked. Don't let it control you. Sarah clenched her fists, forcing her body to stop. She closed her eyes and repeated to herself, "It's not real. It's not real." Slowly, the invisible grip loosened. Cole managed to steady himself as well. But then they noticed something horrifying. Shadows began to form around the carnival. Long, thin figures, their faces obscured, moving in jerky motions like broken marionettes. One by one, they emerged from the glowing lights, lining the edges of the fairground. "Those aren't people," Cole muttered. Zara's lantern sputtered out, plunging them into near darkness except for the carnival glow. The shadow figures turned their heads in unison, facing Sarah and Cole. A sound escaped from them, something between a laugh and a shriek, distorted as though played backward on an old record. Suddenly, one of the shadows darted forward, moving impossibly fast. Cole fired his gun. The bullet passed through the figure, shattering a tree behind it. The shadow lunged at him, cold fingers brushing against his arm. His skin burned like ice. Zara screamed, yanking Cole back. "Run!" They sprinted toward the main road, their hearts pounding. The shadows gave chase, gliding rather than running. Every time they looked back, more had joined, their shapes flickering like smoke caught in the wind. They didn't stop until they reached the abandoned gas station on the edge of town. Cole slammed the door shut and shoved a wooden beam against it. Both of them collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. For a moment, silence. Then the faint sound of carnival laughter seeped under the door. Zara pressed her hands to her ears, rocking back and forth. "It's not just a place," she whispered. "It's alive. The carnival itself is alive." Cole, still trying to catch his breath, leaned forward. "We need to know what it wants. Why it's here. Why it takes people." Sarah shook her head. "I think I already know. It feeds on us. On fear. On attention. Every time people talk about the legend, every time they remember it, the carnival grows stronger." Cole thought of the newspaper clipping, the rumors, the endless retelling of the story. Could they have been feeding this thing all along? Before he could ask, the walls of the gas station rattled violently. The shadow figures were outside, pounding at the glass, their faces pressing against the windows. Cole lifted his gun again, though his hands trembled. Door groaned. Cracks began to form in the wood. Sarah grabbed his arm, her eyes wild. "We can't stay here. If it wants us, it won't stop." "Then where do we go?" Cole demanded. Zara's eyes flicked to the horizon, where the carnival lights shimmered, brighter than ever. "We go back. We face it." Cole stared at her like she was insane. "Face it? You saw what it can do." "We don't have a choice," Sarah said firmly. "If we run, it'll keep coming. If we hide, it'll drag us out. The only way out is through." The pounding grew louder. Glass shattered as shadow hands slipped inside, reaching. Cole cursed under his breath, shoving the wooden beam aside. "Find out of you. But if this is a trap, we're dead." Tay burst out of the gas station, sprinting toward the carnival glow. The shadows followed, shrieking and distorting the night air. Sarah and Cole ran until their lungs burned, until the ground beneath them shifted, until the world itself seemed to ripple like water. And then, without realizing how, they were inside. The carnival was alive around them. Rides moving, games flashing, food stands steaming with impossible colors. But there were no people. Only echoes. Only shadows. Zara's voice trembled as she whispered, "This is where they went. Every missing person. They never left. They're all still here." Cole turned slowly, and his stomach dropped. The carousel horses were empty. Each one carried a rider, a figure frozen mid-scream, their faces pale and glassy-eyed. Some of them looked decades old. their clothes torn and faded. The missing townsfolk. The laughter rose around them, deafening now. And in the center of the carnival, something vast began to stir. Carnival stretched endlessly before Sarah and Cole, a distorted maze of glowing lights and moving shadows. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn, burnt sugar, and something acrid, like metal burning. The carousel spun slowly, its music warped and eerie, each note echoing as though it carried centuries of fear. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped Cole's arm. "We have to find them," she whispered. "The kids? They're still here." Cole nodded grimly. "Stay close. Watch the shadows." They moved cautiously, stepping over cracked cobblestones that seemed to shift underfoot. Every step they took made the carnival pulse, the lights flickering in time with their heartbeats. In the distance, a faint glow drew them forward, brighter than the rest of the fairground. As they approached, they saw it, a large tent, unlike the others. Its canvas was black as midnight, edges frayed and moving, as if alive. A golden emblem glimmered on the flap, a top hat with a crescent moon stitched beneath it. "The main tent," Sarah murmured. "That's where the ringmaster is." Cole raised his gun, though he knew it might be useless. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Sarah nodded. Together, they pushed open the tent flap. Inside, the air was warmer, almost suffocating. The space was enormous, filled with mirrors of every shape and size. The surface of each mirror rippled like liquid, reflecting distorted images of themselves. And then they saw them. The 5 missing teenagers, Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, and Paul, stood frozen in the center of the tent. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, faces pale as if the light had drained their color. But the moment they noticed Sarah and Cole, the teens' heads jerked unnaturally, as though controlled by strings. Cole whispered, "It's the ringmaster. He's controlling them." From the shadows, a slow, deliberate clap echoed through the tent. A figure emerged, tall, impossibly thin, dressed in black with a top hat casting a shadow over his face. His eyes, unnervingly bright, gleamed beneath the brim. "Ah," the man's voice hissed, smooth and chilling. "I see you found my little collection." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Who are you? What have you done to them?" The ringmaster smiled, a slow, cruel curve of lips. "I am every carnival, every shadow, every laughter you have ever feared. I am time itself made flesh. And these children," he gestured toward the frozen teens, "they are mine, collected across the decades, preserved in my mirrors. They are not dead. Not yet. They belong here, as I always intended." Cole tightened his grip on his gun. "You're sick. You're a monster." The ringmaster's laugh filled the tent, echoing from the mirrors. "Monster? No, detective. I am eternal. And soon, so shall you." Sarah stepped forward, shaking but resolute. "We won't let you keep them. We'll stop you." The ringmaster tilted his head, amused. "Ah, brave, but foolish. Every soul that steps into my carnival becomes part of it. Even now, your fear nourishes it. It grows stronger. You have already begun to belong." Suddenly, the mirrors shimmered violently. The teens' reflections shifted independently, showing them screaming, crying, moving toward the edges of the mirrors as if trying to escape. The ringmaster's control flickered for a moment. "No, detective," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Will you join them, or will you resist?" Sarah remembered Mrs. Harper's words. "The only way out is through." Taking a deep breath, she grabbed Cole's hand and ran toward the nearest mirror. She didn't look at the reflection. She didn't look at the ringmaster. She ran straight through it. 2 mirrors swallowed them in cold, liquid darkness. For a terrifying moment, Zara felt herself dissolving, losing sense of her body, her past, her reality. Cole was beside her, screaming her name, but the sound seemed distant. 10. A sudden pull, a surge of force. They emerged into another room. White, empty, silent. The teens were there, blinking, alive, stepping forward from their frozen positions. The ringmaster's voice followed them, distant now, echoing as if from the edge of a void. You cannot leave. Not yet. The carnival always waits. Sarah turned to see Cole supporting Kevin, who looked pale but unharmed. Linda ran into Sarah's arms, sobbing quietly. Mark, Jenny, and Paul gathered nearby, trembling but alive. Cole clenched his fists. We need to get them out. All of them. Sarah scanned the white room. There was a single door. Beyond it, the faint sunlight of the real world seeped in. But between them and freedom, a final obstacle emerged. The ringmaster himself, stepping through the mirror, his form flickering between solidity and shadow. You cannot leave, he hissed, advancing. This is my domain. Sarah gritted her teeth. You're not eternal. You're just trapped by your own fear. Cole and Sarah moved as one, shielding the teens. Together, they forced the ringmaster back, step by step, toward the mirror he had come from. The shadows twisted around him, writhing, screaming, trying to cling to him. With a final surge, Sarah lunged forward, pushing the ringmaster into the mirror. The glass rippled violently, swallowing him whole. A deafening crack echoed through the room as the mirror imploded, fragments scattering like mist. Teens blinked, confused but free. The oppressive weight lifted. The carnival's music, the shadows, the glowing lights. They were gone. Sarah sank to her knees, exhaustion overwhelming her. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. It's over, for now. But in the back of her mind, a whisper remained. The echo of the ringmaster's last words. The carnival always waits. Today's sunlight was harsh after the white room's oppressive gloom. Sarah, Cole, and the 5 rescued teenagers stumbled into the open air, the town's fields stretching out before them. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the real world smelled sweet. Grass, dew, and warm summer air. Kevin, still pale but steadying himself, looked around. Is it really over? He asked quietly. Zara offered him a shaky smile. For now, yes, you're safe. Linda clutched her arm around Mark. I can't believe it. I thought we were gone forever. Cole scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing. The empty fields beyond the town seemed peaceful, but something inside him refused to relax. The carnival's evil had a way of leaving traces, and he wasn't convinced it had vanished completely. Zara walked slowly, her mind replaying every horrifying detail. The mirrors, the shadows, the ringmaster's voice. We need to make sure no one else gets trapped, she said finally. This thing is too powerful to leave alone. Cole nodded. We'll gather the town, warn them, document everything. If it comes back, we can be ready. The teens walked beside them, hesitant, fragile, yet alive. Their parents were already arriving, running toward their children with tears streaming down their faces. Emotions erupted. Hugs, sobs, laughter mingled with disbelief. The sight made Sarah's chest ache. It was everything she had been fighting for. Mrs. Hayes embraced her daughter, whispering over and over, You're safe, Linda. You're safe. Kevin's father knelt beside him. I thought I'd never see you again. Kevin just shook, unable to speak, clinging to the man who had once carried him on his shoulders. Later, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Cole and Sarah met in the quiet of the town square. The carnival grounds were completely empty. Only trampled grass and faint tire tracks remained. No tents, no lights, no shadows. Sarah shivered. It's gone, but I can still hear it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that music. Faint, almost like it's calling. Cole exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. We did what we could. The kids are safe. And the ringmaster? Gone. At least we hope he's gone for good. Sarah turned to him. What if he's not? What if the carnival is just waiting, lurking somewhere, collecting more souls? Cole's jaw tightened. The end will be ready. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. But we can't let fear control our lives. People need to live, not hide from shadows. The two of them walked toward the fields, where the teenagers were playing quietly, cautiously reclaiming a sense of normalcy. For the first time in decades, laughter, not shadow, echoed through the empty space. That night, Sarah sat on the porch of her home, staring at the stars. Linda, Mark, Jenny, Kevin, and Paul were asleep inside, exhausted but alive. Her hands were still trembling from the day's events. She pulled out the small notebook she had kept, her own record of what had happened. Every detail, every clue, every shadow. She would make sure it was remembered. But, as she closed the notebook, a faint glimmer caught her eye. Across the field, just beyond the tree line, something moved. A flash of red and gold. A sliver of light that seemed alive. Her breath caught. She squinted, heart hammering. For a moment, it was nothing more than a trick of the wind. But then she saw it again. A flicker of carnival lights. Her stomach twisted. The calliope music began softly, almost teasingly, floating on the summer breeze. Zara swallowed hard. She whispered to herself, "It's waiting. Always waiting." In the following weeks, the town tried to return to normal. News crews came and went, asking questions that the townsfolk couldn't fully answer. Some of the teens' families moved away, unable to face the memories of that summer night. Others stayed, clinging to their routines, hoping that what they had endured was a one-time horror. Cole continued his investigations, digging into historical records, old missing persons cases, anything tied to carnivals or unexplained disappearances. He found patterns, decades of children vanishing, all connected to Gallagher and Sons, all ending with whispers of a ringmaster who never truly died. Sarah, meanwhile, dedicated herself to writing down every encounter, every reflection, every shadowed moment. Her hope was that if the carnival returned, someone else could be warned, that history wouldn't repeat itself without at least a chance to fight back. But both Cole and Sarah knew, deep down, that some part of the carnival might never be destroyed. It existed somewhere, waiting, collecting, patient. One evening, as the town lay silent under a blanket of stars, Kevin walked up to Sarah, holding a small paper star he had folded during the day. "He made this for you," he said softly. "Thank you for saving us." Sarah smiled, taking the paper. She could feel the weight of their gratitude. But the memory of the mirrors, the ringmaster, and the shadows lingered. "I'm glad you're safe," she whispered. She looked up at the horizon, toward the forest where the carnival had vanished, and possibly would return. A soft wind stirred. The calliope music, distant and haunting, tickled the edge of her hearing. She shivered, knowing that some stories never truly end. The carnival would wait, and it would return, because the Vanishing Carnival was eternal.
Welcome to Horror Out.